Oh,
back.
great.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's get started at the top. So, hey, welcome back to the Sleep Edit. I am Dr. Craig Canterbury.
And I'm Arielle Greenleaf.
We thought since it is closing in on the end of the year, we would talk about navigating holiday sleep challenges for parents and children because this isn't a time where you're associated with the best sleep. If there's a through line for this, I'd say, we may get in the weeds a little bit here, but the main thing is it's not going to be perfect. That's okay. Enjoy your time with your friends and family, and you can sort it all out in January. It's really going to be okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember as a new parent, I had a September baby, so I had a 2.5 month old or something like that. And I got a memory from 10 years ago saying, what does one do to keep an infant on schedule during the holidays? She goes to bed between 7 and 8 every night. I don't know how that's going to be possible if I have a house full of people, but it was definitely a tough year. But then a year later, I thought the holidays were always going to be sleepless and horrible. A year later, everything was fine. Sometimes it's rough and then it gets better.
I think if it's your first child and if it's a really young infant, it feels totally overwhelming,
Totally.
right?
Yeah,
I
I
think,
think that's the biggest thing. Just try. I think you gave really good advice. We can just start the show now. Just
yeah,
enjoy the holidays.
yeah. Enjoy the holidays as best you can.
Yeah.
You have to extend yourself a little bit of grace. You're going to be dealing with grandparents and aunts and uncles who are really excited to spend time with the baby. For me, as we were just talking about before the show, a little bit older than Ariel, my parents would often apply the best 70s parenting technique and knowledge to, and not understand why we were doing things in a certain way. Parenting has changed and the way we think about problems have changed. We weren't going to be sitting around smoking cigarettes and drinking vodka tonics and playing pinochle with the neighbors during the holidays. Not that my parents do that anymore either, but that's what it was like when I was a kid. Well, let's break it down by the challenges parents can face.
Yeah.
One is just travel, right? This may be the first time you are taking your child and spending the night somewhere else. If you had a baby in September or August, this might be the first time you're leaving the cocoon of your home where, you may be still struggling with your child's sleep, but at least you have more control over what's happening.
Yeah, I actually working with someone right now whose son just doing remarkably well. I mean, a toddler who had never slept through the night and she had attempted sleep training several times and it just wasn't working. However, she needed to get out of the house and go see family. And she said, okay, let's just give it a try and do a nap at my sister's house. Let's do Auntie Nap. And it did not go that well. I think that if your children are sleeping well at home and they go down easily, and then you travel and suddenly they don't, you go back to giving yourself grace and understanding that this is an exciting time for them too, even if they're young and they can't express that. And offering help is not going to undo any sleep training you've done or any good habits you've created. It's just helping your baby or child get the rest they need so that you can all have a good time.
Parents become very rigid about routines and the perfect environmental settings. Those are often for kids that are maybe have a little bit less flexibility. I remember I had close friends before I had kids. Their kid was 15 months old, and we would play Mario Party, and their kid would sleep on a cushion on the floor.
Right.
That kid could sleep anywhere. They weren't stressed about this.
Hmm.
If you struggle with your child's sleep, you're probably have a little bit of, you're still carrying a little bit of worry that you're going to derail everything that you've done. The fact is, the holiday trips often are pretty short trips, right? Like a couple of nights of screwy sleep at your in laws is not going to destroy your kid's sleep for the next 3 months. You just have to go back to the routines that got you to a place of success.
Right.
We're talking a little bit of time zones and stuff. It kind of depends, right? That's a special case.
Mm-hmm.
But some families will be flying.
Yep.
Some families are going to be driving. Some people are going to have people visiting.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think parents should do? Hopefully, this is going to drop before Thanksgiving, at least before the winter holidays. Anything parents should be doing a week or two before they travel?
It's a good question. I think going back to what you were saying about people that have struggled with their child's sleep and they've done a lot of work to get their child in a good place. You can always practice putting your child in a pack and play or seeing how they nap there. If you are going to a different time zone, you can start to try to shift the schedule. But ultimately, I really feel like you just have to go with the flow when you get there. I don't feel that there's a ton of stuff that you should be doing in preparation for it. Creates more anxiety. But some things that you can think about are when you get to your destination, what is the sleeping space going to look like? Are you going to have is your child going to have their own sleeping space? Are you going to be sharing a room together? Are you in a hotel room? Are you at someone's home? Can we control? Let's bring the white noise machine. Let's bring blackout shades. They have travel blackout shades. Or if you're in a hotel room, that's not a problem. If you have a toddler who likes to have a nightlight, bring the nightlight, bring the lovey that your toddler likes. Try to make it comfortable for them and recreate a similar situation as they would have at home. My clients have always gotten very creative. If staying anywhere where they're supposed to room share with their child and they're nervous because the child can see them and they're overstimulated, they have often used bathrooms and closets as alternative sleep spaces just during that temporary period so that the child can have their own space and isn't waking up and seeing mom and dad there and wanting to get into bed with them. Being creative is good, but also getting into the mindset that you need to be flexible and you're going to get through it. And the ultimate goal is just to try to keep your child well rested, whether that means holding them or passing them off to grandma halfway through the night.
I think where your kids sleep, creativity extends to older kids too. What struck me was my wife's aunt and uncle have a beach place in Long Island. So everybody would go and we'd kind of, if we could, it's great to match up the kids who are on similar schedules. Even if you could cohort people together in a sleeping environment. Like there was the big closets, two of the younger kids who were not infants were in a little closet together. They were both early risers. So that was great because they didn't get the non-early risers up. And it is funny too. I think the flip side is parents are worried about it, but also sometimes other people have to be a little bit flexible too, right? Like if you are the first person with small children and you go to stay with your brother and his wife or something, they're used to sleeping till noon on the weekends. I mean, let me tell you, they're also going to be disappointed in your child's sleeping habit. Christmas morning might happen a little bit earlier than they were expecting.
You're
Hey,
not looking at brunch, you're looking at early morning.
yeah, brunch is not a thing that people with small children have. I remember Christmas morning, now I live fairly close to my folks. So we used to come down and my parents had a Keurig. My dad would get the good coffee, but they'd make individual things with the Keurig. And it would be like 6 a.m. and my dad would be just working on this machine for what felt like 20 minutes to produce 4 adult-sized coffee. And I was just dying. And I'm like, "Look, God, Dad, can you move this along? I love you, God. You're great. But next time, what I would have done is brought my own coffee maker.
There you go.
It would actually be able to produce a whole pot of coffee, which is the start of what you need on those early mornings. You know, something that I'm interested in, because I think it would have been great for my kids who are, especially one kid was a light sensitive early riser. These sort of sleep pods kind of things that some parents ask me about.
I mean, in theory, they're great. I don't know if they're necessarily safe.
Well,
I think I'd have to look into that more,
you know,
but I think anything that can give a child their own space and have it dark, because children are sensitive to light and the sun is coming up earlier. So any way to sort of make them feel, and you have to also remember that young children in their cribs feel safe in that enclosed space. Making sure they don't feel vulnerable can be really helpful. I don't 100% know the safety facts around them, and I didn't have one when Ashley was an infant. So in theory, they look amazing.
well, I think this is a good point. If you're traveling with an infant, you need to make sure that you have a safe sleep environment. Cribs can be rented in cities and towns. If you're staying in a hotel, you can get them. Make sure that your child is sleeping in a safe environment, especially with a young infant. Toddlers or preschoolers, that's where I think some of these pod things might be really useful. It's almost like a pop-up tent or a cave where a kid can go into. If you're sharing a room, I think that might be a fun and safe thing to do. But with infants, get the safe sleep first. Don't put your child in some antique crib that your mom got at a flea market because it's probably not safe. Pack and plays are safe, right? They can
Yes.
use a pack and play, but don't have soft pillows, blankets, etc.
And I think some hotels have cribs. If you ask, they'll have a rollaway crib. That's something you can do ahead of time. Figure out wherever you're going, figure out that sort of thing. Several times we rented cribs at rental homes or got them at hotels, and they were really helpful.
I think that is, yeah. And again, like a lot of times when you're traveling in car, it's easy, right? Like bring a pack and play, whatever. But if you're flying somewhere and you can rent something and have it available when you get there, you're visiting family, being like, hey, can you pick this up for me? You go from traveling light to traveling with an infant. It's like you're ready for an expedition to the Himalayas. It's insanity.
Yeah.
One thing I'm going to tell you guys, if your child has a transitional object, like a favorite stuffed animal, be very careful that that makes the return trip, that it makes the trip out and makes the trip back. My older boy has a stuffed bear that he got in infancy. If we left this in a rest stop, I would have driven 3 hours back to get this because honestly, I think he would have been fine, but I would have been panicked. We lost it. I remember at one point, it was like, should we buy another one and launder it a bunch? No, it was too late. Honestly, you never know what magic causes your child to pick a transitional object. I have two kids. One had one he was very attached to. One could not have cared less about any stuffed animals. But if you get one early on, your kid seems to like it, buy another one immediately and alternate them so you've got a backup.
Yeah,
You
I was
know,
stuck because I could not find a backup.
well, yeah, a lot of animals, they're like seasonal, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and it's just like a little lovey with a head and like a little blanket on it. So very easy to get caught up in things and be left behind. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
well, as the Marines say, two is one is none. They were actually talking about stuffed animals.
Uh,
So, what do you think about the napping at weird times that can happen on
yeah,
the
I
car or the
mean,
plane? I'm like, my God, if your kid naps in the plane, I mean, thank your lucky stars.
yeah,
Everyone on the plane is going to give you a standing ovation if your child naps on the plane.
absolutely. I think as far as car travel goes, I do think if you have a child that sleeps well in the car, plan the travel around nap times or even bedtime. Anytime you can maximize the sleep because you're going to be in random places. And if your child doesn't sleep well in random places, utilize the car. Absolutely. I actually do have clients who schedule flights at certain times, like around nap times, and it's been successful. They usually have to support the child, and it's usually like an infant or a young toddler, but like probably older toddlers would be a little difficult. I think that naps over holidays when your child is tired, it's pretty obvious. So if you can prioritize helping them get a little bit of rest, I would not recommend skipping naps, especially with younger infants and toddlers, because that will be a nightmare for everybody.
Yes.
Even if your toddler is sleeping on you or on your lap or something like that, that's fine. But it is important to make sure that your child is getting rest throughout the day. And then being mindful of bedtime. I know that's really tough with dinners and things like that. But sometimes it can backfire if you're pushing too far for bedtime.
I do love the idea of the car, especially if you have a car seat. Sometimes you're coming to somebody else's house.
Mm.
As important as your child's sleep schedule is, people may not like it if you're like, please be quiet because my baby needs to sleep now. If they have a car seat and you can take them for a ride, it may not be their usual nap, but they get like 20 or 30 minutes of sleep. You can decompress from the stress that sometimes happens in the holidays.
Yeah.
It's fraught for
Right.
everyone spending time with family.
Yeah.
Wonderful too.
Back in the early days, I decided that I couldn't give up control. So I decided I was just going to host as much as I could. And that allowed me less stress. This is not going to be true for everybody. Some people find it very stressful to host, but it allowed me to have my child in her own space and be able to put her down to sleep at normal times and use extra white noise, move people into different rooms. It was much less stressful than me trying to say, oh, I got to zip over here and then I got to go over to this grandmother's house and that grandfather's house and this in-law. So for me, hosting was a lifesaver, but I know that's not true for everyone. But being able to control her schedule still alleviated my stress.
I'd say too, you mentioned shuttling from house to house. If you live close to your relatives, it's okay. You don't have to do everything. You can sit something out. If you're going someplace else for dinner and then somebody else's house for dessert, it's okay for one of the parents to opt out of that and say, you know what, like, if I stay with my in-laws, that would usually be me. I'd so be like, okay, I'm going to go back to the house with the kids. You guys hang out longer. That's totally cool. Your 15-month-old doesn't have to participate in every single act.
Right.
It's quality, not quantity. One thing I want to talk about is something that when my kids were little, used to get talked about a lot more, which is parents wanting to give their kids Benadryl or diphenhydramine to fall
Oh
asleep at
boy.
travel. It's really something that's not recommended for a couple of reasons. It can be a little tricky to dose. You're basically giving 1.5, the dose is 1.5, their kilo and weight every 6 hours. The math is not always easy for tired parents. The diphenhydramine can also have a paradoxical response, so it can actually make your kid hyper. So you can imagine if you're on a crowded plane and it's time for your child to sleep and you give them medicine that's just disinhibiting them and making them crazy, that might not work well. I'd say it's probably one of those things that I would steer clear of.
Yeah, I have actually had a couple of clients over the years who not I did not recommend this, just to make that very clear, have given their children Benadryl on a transatlantic flight or something like that, and it has caused the opposite effect where the child is just bonkers and off the walls. Benadryl in general isn't a great thing, right? They're just saying it's not very great for anybody right now. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but either way, it can definitely make children bonkers.
And I'd say like melatonin too, like it, if you, yeah, again, if you're flying overnight, talk to your pediatrician. Like you want to make sure the dose is right. You want to make sure it's not going to cause any problems with other stuff that your child's health issues or something like that. And like probably don't try something the first time when you're on a plane. We flew to England overnight when Charlie was 7 months. We thought about leaving him with relatives. My wife went to see a lactation consultant who told her that he would grieve the breast if he stayed behind, which I think is a pretty messed up thing to say. So we ended up bringing him, and he did not. He cried the whole overnight flight, and then we had to drive 300 miles on the wrong side of the road. He immediately adjusted to the schedule in England to the point where we would expect him to be sleeping in and getting up late, but no, he was up with dawn when we my advice to you is if you have the opportunity to take a nice trip to England and you have the opportunity to leave your child behind, I empower you to make that decision.
Yeah.
We've all made pictures and it was a great time. Might have been more fun without it. Love you, Charlie. Let's talk a little bit about time zone stuff to skip around the outline a little bit and then maybe back to the food stuff. Because I think that it's worth, this is one of those things that people are maybe going to stress a little bit about and
Yeah. I think
probably, you know,
I think there's always, I mean, I work with parents of children who have sleep problems. Eventually they don't. Once they work with me, they don't. But the people that come to me are stressed. And so even an hour time change, parents are freaking out. I think for just an hour time change, you can keep your child on their normal schedule. You don't have to make dramatic shifts. Of course, if you're going like 6 hours the other way, that's a different thing. But just an hour, you may just want to consider keeping your child on the same schedule.
most families are not traveling 5 or 6 hours, right? If you're staying in the US, the most you're probably traveling is 2 or 3 hours. Now, if you're flying east, it's very easy to stay on the same schedule. Imagine you're on California time, so your kid is sleeping from 7 to 7. You fly to the East Coast, and all of a sudden, they're on a 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. schedule. Lean into that. Stay up a little bit later, have them sleep in a little bit. If your room's dark, maybe you'll be successful. It's harder if you're going the opposite direction. Your child is on a 7 to 7 schedule, and they fly from New York to San Francisco, and all of a sudden they are on a 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. schedule. That's less fun for everyone. That being said, if you can make it work, you can try to stay on the same schedule. You know, it's funny. We had some friends were very fortunate. They were taking an around the world trip. They're like, what do we do about our kids' sleep? The math is too complicated. You're flying to like all these different time zones, just like, their kids were like junior high age kids,
Mm,
but you're just going to be dealing with some jet lag. I'd say your average holiday trip, it's a couple of nights, stay on your home schedule. Don't worry about it too much. If you're staying longer, natural light exposure can be really helpful. Physical activity, limiting screen time. Though I empower you if your kid's on the plane and they want the iPad, just let them have the iPad.
mhm.
Like,
Absolutely.
I don't like kids being on screens all the time, but in situations that are both stressful and boring, it's totally okay. Like parents in the doctor's office, their 3-year-olds come in the sleep clinic and they're taking the kid's phone away when I'm talking to them. I'm like, let them have the phone. This is a totally appropriate time for your child to be entertained and not stressed.
Mhm.
Um, I think this is such a new first parent lesson to learn.
Mm.
If the kids want to watch more TV than you're used to, it's not going to kill them.
Right. Right.
Let set your limits, but also recognize that they raised you. You probably turned out okay. They're not going to destroy your child with a little bit of extra cartoons, right?
Right.
Your kid
Exactly.
will be
But I think that goes into the food stuff that you're talking about as well. You're thinking about being spoiled in different ways. We're thinking about sugar and candy and treats and all the things.
I was so excited for Christmas cookies. That is my jam.
Oh, me too.
This is one of those things. I kind of took a little bit of a dive into sugar, chocolate stuff. I'd say, first of all of the literature looking at the relationship between food and specifically sugar intake and children's sleep was looking at kids' habitual diets.
Mm.
So, looking at kids, the evidence is all over the place. There was an Australian study, and I'll put these on the show notes, about 300 kids aged 12. Almost all these kids, 81% of them, were over the recommended sugar intake limits. The proportion of sugar in their diet was not associated with behavioral change. But there's another much larger study at about 2,600 kids, 6 to 12, and found that kids who were having more sugary beverages specifically had decreased sleep duration and increased sleep depth on school days. So I think there is something to be said. If you're having soda or juice, that's like sugar water. That immediately hits your bloodstream. If you're having a cookie, something with fat in it, your glucose peak is probably going to be a little bit less. But at the end of the day, if your kid wants to have a cookie, let them have a cookie. It's Christmas or it's Hanukkah or whatever. Like the message shouldn't be let's all restrict our diets, because I think that can also be unhealthy. That being said, it's quality, not quantity. Letting your kid enjoy some Christmas cookies, that's great. Letting your kid eat all the Christmas cookies, probably not necessary.
I mean,
You
also just know your kid because I feel like some children are very sensitive to different things and others, they can watch their iPad and all day long until bedtime and eat a whole jar of sugar and they'll go to bed and sleep 12 hours. So it just really
know,
depends on your child too.
this is the hard thing about being a parent, right? Christmas is stress. Maybe you're a little stressed because you're dealing with your family. There's a lot of chaotic energy going on. Your kid is probably more likely to have a tantrum than they would otherwise,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Being tired, being revved up, what gets kids more nuts than getting a bunch of presents? It's got so much stress, like good stress, but it really gets them up. You relax a little bit about the iPad, you take it away, your kid has a tantrum. My son was reminiscing about his visiting friends, and it wasn't a holiday. I'm like, you're done with your screen time. And he took his iPad. He's probably 6, and he smashed it on the ground. Something in a
Well,
memory came over this trip, and the thing was broken. I'm like, well, okay, I guess you don't have that anymore.
right.
But,
Well,
yeah, if it makes your kids totally aggro, maybe be a little bit careful. But, you had to go back in the literature where they're actually doing glucose challenges on kids to see if
mm,
it affects their behavior. There was no change in aggressive behavior compared to placebo. If you know your kid can't tolerate this, that's fine. But make sure they have something else they can enjoy.
yeah.
I think in general, I see a lot of parents who are very restrictive about their kids' foods for the behavioral reasons, which usually there's not a lot of evidence for. You can parent your child any way you want, but sometimes, it's one thing if they have a peanut allergy, don't give them peanut butter. But if you're like, oh, they get a little hyperactive with sugar, you know, don't be like, well, you can't have dessert and everybody else is. That's kind of how I feel about that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you bring up tantrums too, because that ties back to what we've been saying. Even if sleep is wonky, try to keep your child well rested. Usually, children are tantruming when they're tired or hungry. So
Sure.
keep them well rested and fed.
Yeah.
Don't just feed them sugar. Make sure they're having sugar, but also a piece of broccoli,
Yeah.
some protein. Those are the two things that really lead to, in my opinion, tantrums.
For me, the main thing with having too much sugar, unless your child has diabetes or something, is that sugar crash you get
Oh, yeah.
afterwards. If they've had nothing but a cup of ginger ale and a bunch of candy, they're probably going to be freaking out. It really can be a challenge. I remember when my kids were little and everybody's running around. Are they really going to sit at the table and eat a pork chop or something? It's not happening.
Your turkey.
Oh man, can I just say I'm not a big turkey guy. We're hosting a big Thanksgiving, and I'm like, tryptophan, we love that in Sleep World, right? It's great.
There we
But
go.
I just feel like it's hard to cook it right. I'd rather everybody had, if I had a miniature capon myself, be happier.
I think you're not alone. I just went to a Friendsgiving yesterday and there was no turkey. I am hosting 2 Thanksgivings, so I have 2 28-pound turkeys to pick up this weekend. I don't mind turkey because I like the sides. Give me the gravy and I'll just put the sides around it, and then the turkey's kind of hidden by everything else.
Not to be there, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
so I think we've kind of covered like, yeah, keep your kids' schedule as routine as possible, but recognize it's not gonna be perfect. What do you do if it's your kid's bedtime and they're totally jazzed up? Well, how can you kinda take things
Sure.
down?
Just taking them out, changing their environment, even if it's like a walk outside, a bath, or just going into a different room that's darker and quieter. It might take a little bit of time before they actually settle because when they're all jazzed up, it can take some time. But I think removing yourself and your child from that situation, or even a car ride, like you were saying, just some sort of change of scenery to calm them down and get them to a place of calmer can be helpful.
Yeah, get them outside, change of scene. I mean, it's 60 degrees today where I am, which is not typical fall weather, but it's cold. Like, yeah, your kids can play outside in the cold. That's okay. Um,
Definitely get them some physical activity, even if they're babies. Go outside with them. Get
yeah,
outside,
or
get the fresh
if you want to be
air.
the cool dad or mom, take them outside and play a game with them. Kick a ball around, do something like that. The natural light exposure can be really helpful as well.
Definitely.
Try to channel some of that crazy energy so they're not just slapping their siblings or something like that.
And I think it's so easy to say this now, 10 years into parenting, but try not to stress. Try to let go a little bit. I know it's hard to let go, especially for those who have worked so hard on your child's sleep. But I promise you, you'll get back on track. If you have a regular, beautiful schedule and routine, you'll get back there. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa,
Oh.
Happy New Year, Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I would agree. The what got you here, well, your routines, just when you get home, just go back to them. It'll be okay. Hey, I have one pro tip I want to share.
Love
We like
this.
do
I want to
this.
hear it.
So New Year's, right? What do we know about New Year's? You stay up till midnight. Well, I remember one year we were staying with some friends. The kids were probably, I think my oldest son was maybe 10 or 11. And they wanted to stay up to midnight. And the last thing I wanted was to be hanging out with my kids at midnight. So we set all the clocks in the house significantly later. And parents, Netflix actually has a ball drop thing you can play at an earlier time to simulate a New Year's. So our kids went to bed at 9 o'clock and then they couldn't sleep for a while because they were so excited. The next day, my oldest son was probably up to 11. He's like, I was up to like 4 or 5 in the morning. It was crazy. Or, here's my pro tip, just lie to your kids. Oh, it's moral almost.
You're simulating things to
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
promote their health and allow them to have fun while you're keeping them on track.
I think my kids do know that we did this. We didn't routinely lie to them, but honestly, I thought it was kind of funny too. And I was super surprised that it actually worked. So yeah, that's all I've got. As Ariel said, give yourself a break, give your kids a break, be flexible. You're going to be fine.
Absolutely.
A peaceful, calm holiday season to everyone. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy some sweets. Try not to be too stressed.
Amen.
Okay.